Benny Andersson was never the kind of person who chased attention, yet his work reached millions of people around the world. While many artists dream of being in the spotlight, Benny found his place somewhere quieter, behind the scenes, where the real magic of music often happens. He helped create the sound that defined an entire generation, but he was not the face people immediately recognized. Instead, he worked in studios, focusing on melodies, harmonies, and arrangements that would later become unforgettable songs. As a key member of ABBA, he played a major role in shaping hits that people still listen to today. Songs like Dancing Queen and The Winner Takes It All carry emotional depth and musical brilliance that go far beyond simple pop music. But behind these songs was a man who preferred to stay out of the spotlight. Benny's story is not just about fame and success. It is about dedication, quiet passion, and the hidden struggles that come with creating something meaningful. For many years, people wondered what really went on behind the scenes of ABBA's success. Now, as he reflects on his life, Benny has begun to share a deeper and more honest version of his journey, one that includes not just triumphs, but also pain, exhaustion, and personal challenges that were never fully understood before. Benny Andersson was born on December 16, 1946, in Stockholm, Sweden, into a simple working-class family. Music was not seen as a serious career path in his home, but it was always present in his life. His father and grandfather both loved music, and they introduced him to it at a very young age. When he was just 6 years old, Benny started playing the accordion, an instrument that would spark his lifelong interest in music. Unlike many children who are drawn to attention and applause, Benny was more interested in understanding how music worked. He was curious about melodies, rhythms, and how different sounds could come together to create something beautiful. He taught himself to play the piano by listening carefully and repeating what he heard. This natural talent allowed him to learn quickly and develop a deep connection with music. By the time he was 10 years old, he was already performing at small gatherings and school events. However, he did not play to impress others. Instead, he played because he truly loved the process of creating music. He was fascinated by everything from classical composers like Bach to traditional Swedish folk songs. These early influences helped shape his unique musical style, which would later become one of the defining features of ABBA's sound. Even at a young age, it was clear that Benny was not just another musician. He was someone who understood music on a deeper level. The journey of ABBA began when Benny teamed up with Björn Ulvaeus, and together they started writing songs that blended catchy melodies with meaningful lyrics. Later, Agnetha Faltskog and Annie Frid Lyngstad joined them, forming the group that would soon become a global sensation. Their breakthrough came when they won the Eurovision Song Contest 1974 with their song, Waterloo. This moment changed everything. Suddenly, ABBA was no longer just a local band. They were international stars. Their music spread quickly across Europe and then to the rest of the world. Benny's role in the group was crucial. While others often received attention for their performances and vocals, Benny focused on the structure of the songs. He worked on arrangements, melodies, and the overall sound that made ABBA unique. His ability to blend different musical styles helped create songs that were both catchy and emotionally powerful. As ABBA's popularity grew, so did the pressure. They were constantly touring, recording, and performing, with little time to rest. Fans saw the glamorous side of their lives, but behind the scenes, things were much more complicated. The constant demand for new music and the stress of maintaining success began to take a toll on everyone in the group, including Benny. As ABBA reached the peak of their success, the pressure became harder to manage. The group was expected to produce hit after hit, and the world was always watching. For Benny, this was a challenging time. He was deeply involved in the creative process, which meant he carried a lot of responsibility. Long hours in the studio and constant touring left him feeling exhausted. At the same time, personal relationships within the group began to suffer. Both couples in the band faced difficulties, and emotional tension started to affect their work. Songs like The Winner Takes It All reflected real feelings of heartbreak and loss. While fans connected with the emotional honesty of these songs, they did not fully understand the pain behind them. Benny, who had always been more private, found it difficult to deal with these personal struggles in such a public environment. He was not someone who easily shared his feelings, which made the situation even more challenging. The contrast between the joyful image of ABBA and the reality behind the scenes became more and more noticeable. Over time, the stress and emotional strain led to the group slowly drifting apart. What once felt like a perfect collaboration began to feel like something that could no longer continue in the same way. When ABBA eventually stopped performing together, it marked the end of an era. For fans, it was a moment of sadness and confusion. Many wondered why such a successful group would choose to step away. For Benny, this period was filled with reflection and silence. After years of constant activity, he finally had time to think about everything that had happened. The applause, the fame, and the success were now in the past, replaced by a quieter life. But this silence was not empty. It was filled with thoughts, memories, and emotions that had been pushed aside during the busy years. Benny began to understand the true cost of success. While he was proud of what ABBA had achieved, he also recognized the personal sacrifices that came with it. Relationships had changed, and the intense pace of their career had left little room for normal life. During this time, Benny focused on new projects and continued to create music, but in a different way. He no longer felt the need to prove anything. Instead, he created music for himself, exploring new ideas and sounds. This period of reflection allowed him to grow, not just as a musician, but as a person. Now, many years later, Benny Andersson has started to speak more openly about his experiences. For decades, fans and media have speculated about what really happened behind the scenes of ABBA's success. Benny's recent reflections offer a more honest and human perspective. He talks about the exhaustion, the emotional struggles, and the challenges of balancing personal life with global fame. His story reminds us that even the most successful people face difficulties that are not always visible to others. What makes his voice so powerful is its honesty. He does not try to hide the hard parts of his journey. Instead, he shares them in a way that feels real and relatable. This openness allows fans to see ABBA in a new light, not just as a group that created great music, but as individuals who went through real-life challenges. Benny's story is not just about looking back at the past. It is also about understanding it and finding meaning in it. By sharing his truth, he gives people a deeper appreciation of the music and the journey behind it. Today, the music of ABBA continues to live on, reaching new generations of listeners around the world. Benny Andersson's contribution to this legacy is impossible to ignore. His work has influenced countless artists and shaped the way pop music is created. Even though he was never the most visible member of the group, his impact is clear in every song. The melodies he created, the arrangements he designed, and the emotions he captured have stood the test of time. Benny's journey shows that true success is not just about fame or recognition. It is about creating something meaningful that lasts. His story also reminds us that behind every great achievement, there are struggles, sacrifices, and moments of doubt. By finally sharing his experiences, Benny has added a new layer to his legacy. He is no longer just the man behind the music. He is also a storyteller, someone who helps us understand what it really means to live a life dedicated to art. In the end, his story is not just about ABBA. It is about passion, resilience, and the quiet strength it takes to keep going, even when the world is not watching. For many years after the peak of ABBA's global success, the public story was simple. The group had become huge, and then they quietly stopped working together. But the real situation, as Benny Andersson has slowly explained over time, was far more complex than just taking a break. Behind the polished image of success, there were long periods of emotional exhaustion, creative pressure, and personal struggles that never fully reached the public. Being part of ABBA meant living inside a constant cycle of expectation. Every new song had to be better than the last one. Every album had to match or beat the success of the previous one. This pressure never really stopped. Even when they were not touring, the group was still mentally tied to their global image. Benny, who often worked quietly behind the scenes, carried much of the responsibility for the music itself. He was deeply involved in shaping the sound, and that meant long hours in studios, endless rewrites, and constant creative decision-making. While fans saw glittering performances and joyful music, the reality was often very different. There were moments of tension, tiredness, and emotional distance between members. Over time, these small cracks grew wider. What once felt like a dream collaboration slowly became something heavier and more difficult to maintain. Benny has described, in a calm and reflective way, that success itself can become a kind of pressure that people do not always notice from the outside. The more successful the group became, the less space there was for normal life. Friendships and relationships inside the group were tested, not just by fame, but by the simple exhaustion of never being able to slow down. Even the joy of creating music began to mix with stress. And yet, despite all of this, the music they created continued to connect with millions of people around the world. That contrast is part of what makes the story so powerful. The audience experienced happiness, while the creators often carried quiet emotional weight. This hidden side of ABBA's journey is what Benny has gradually opened up about in recent years, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a slow understanding of what really happened during those intense years. After ABBA stopped working together as a full-time group, the world moved on quickly, but for Benny Andersson, life entered a very different phase. The loud world of touring, recording, and constant attention was replaced by silence and reflection. At first, this silence felt strange, almost uncomfortable. After years of nonstop activity, suddenly there was space to think, rest, and look back. Many people assumed that the end of ABBA meant sadness or failure, but for Benny, it was more complicated than that. It was both a relief and a loss at the same time. He no longer had the pressure of constant expectations, but he also stepped away from something that had defined a huge part of his life. In this quieter period, he continued making music, but in a more personal and free way. He explored different projects, worked on musicals, and focused on creativity without the same level of global pressure. Over time, he began to understand something important. The story of ABBA was not just about success or fame, but about human limits. Even the most successful groups are made of people, and people have emotions, limits, and breaking points. What fans often saw as perfection was actually the result of hard work, emotional struggle, and constant effort to stay together under pressure. Benny's reflections, shared later in life, are not about blaming the past, but about understanding it more clearly. He has spoken in a calm and honest way about how intense those years were and how much energy it took to keep everything going. One of the most powerful things he has expressed is that success does not always feel the way it looks from the outside. To the world, ABBA looked joyful, bright, and unstoppable. But inside, there were moments of exhaustion and emotional weight that only time could fully reveal. Today, as people continue to rediscover ABBA's music through new generations, Benny's reflections add another layer to their legacy. The songs are still full of energy and emotion, but now they also carry a deeper meaning. They represent not just a time of musical success, but a real human journey filled with creativity, pressure, love, distance, and understanding. In accepting and sharing this truth, Benny Andersson has not changed the music, but he has helped the world understand the story behind it in a more honest and human way. When people look back at the story of ABBA, they often see bright costumes, perfect harmonies, and timeless songs that still play in homes, cars, and radios around the world. But what is often forgotten is that behind all of that were real people dealing with very real emotions. For Benny Andersson, this truth has become clearer with time. He has often reflected on how strange it feels to be part of something so globally successful, while also experiencing the private struggles that no audience ever sees. Fame creates an illusion of perfection, where everything looks smooth and effortless from the outside. But in reality, every performance, every recording session, and every tour required long hours of work, emotional focus, and personal sacrifice. Benny has described music not just as entertainment, but as a demanding craft that takes everything from a person, time, energy, and sometimes emotional balance. While ABBA was reaching the height of global popularity, the members were also learning how difficult it is to maintain both a career and a personal life at the same time. Relationships inside and outside the group were tested under constant pressure. Even moments of success often came with exhaustion rather than pure celebration. What makes Benny's reflections so meaningful is that they do not try to rewrite history or take away from ABBA's achievements. Instead, they simply show the human reality behind it. He has spoken about how important it is to understand that even the brightest success stories come with hidden costs. This understanding does not reduce the value of the music. In fact, it makes it even more powerful. Knowing what the creators went through adds depth to the songs that people already love. It allows listeners to hear not just melodies, but emotions shaped by real experiences. In this way, ABBA's music becomes more than just pop songs. It becomes a record of human life, with all its beauty, pressure, and imperfection. As the years passed, Benny Andersson began to see his journey not just as a success story, but as something more layered and emotional. Time has a way of changing how people understand their past, and for Benny, it brought clarity rather than confusion. Looking back, he has acknowledged that there were moments of exhaustion, difficult decisions, and emotional distance that he did not fully understand at the time. But instead of focusing on regret, his reflections often point toward acceptance. He has spoken in a calm and thoughtful way about how every stage of life brings its own challenges and how even painful experiences can become meaningful with time. In the early years